All right. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to our event today. My name is Chloe Miller, and I'm a co-founder of Brown Baglet along with Shasta Grant. Oops, this just closed. We host classes, events, and we're home to Lunch Break Writers, a writing accountability group that meets on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Time. And you can find more information about our programming on our website, brownbaglet.com. We'll be posting our winter 2025 schedule soon. And tomorrow there's a generative writing workshop that I'm leading that still has a few seats available if you're interested. It should be fun. So today we're very excited to welcome three graphic memoirists. We have Kelcey Ervick, who's the author of The Keeper and the co-editor of Field Guide to Graphic Literature. Alice Kaltman, who's the author of Alice's big, maybe not so big, book of mistakes, and Jesse Lee Kercheval's French Girl. So each person, each author and artist will speak, read for a little bit, about 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll move on to a Q&A. I'll put everyone's bios into the chat and all of the links that you might like to look at. For the Q&A, if you like during the event, you can put some questions into the chat and I'll save them, or you can share them later once we get to that point. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Kelcey. Welcome.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you, Shasta. Thank you, everybody. It's cool to see some familiar names. Some of you I've met in person. Some of you I've just met, in the virtual world on Instagram or Substack. So it's cool to see you here. All right, I'm going to dive in, find my screen, share my screen, start my slideshow. So here is just me reading a little Vladimir Nabokov Speak Memory, because I was a soccer goalie, and my book is about that experience. And Vladimir Nabokov was also a goalie, and he loved being a goalie, but he says when he was a goalie in college that I was less the keeper of a soccer goal than the keeper of a secret. And that's one of the epigraphs in my book. And his secret was that he was also a poet and writer, that he stood in the back of the goal and was writing. And for me with The Keeper, my favorite blurb, the most exciting blurb I got was the one from Alison Bechtel at the top of the book. But the other one that I really appreciated and liked was from KJ Dell'Antonia, who called The Keeper a feminist anthem and a writer's coming of age in graphic disguise. And I think of the book as a Künstlerroman. So there's the Bildungsroman, the sort of coming of age novel. And for the Künstlerroman is the coming of age of an artist. And I feel like KJ Dell'Antonia kind of picked up on that. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. This journey from me being a goalie to me becoming a writer. But I also want to talk about the journey from me becoming a writer of very long, fat paragraphs to thinner, shorter paragraphs in white space, to adding some illustrations to my work, to finally, with The Keeper, having it all hand-lettered and illustrated by me. So I'm going to read from the opening chapter of The Keeper. Everyone knows how birds are created. Less is known about how birds... Sorry, I just put you all on my screen. Less is known about how birds become girls. Our flock came from the banks of the Ohio River. As with all girls, our wings were removed, or did they fall off? But we were given special gifts that few girls had before, and we had to learn how to use them. Mr. Ryan's video begins with a still shot, one of dozens of team photos we'll take over the years. Our uniforms have sashes like we're all Miss America. I'm in the middle in blue, The Keeper. Our team was the 1971 Cardinals, named for Ohio's state bird and the year we were all born. We spent the 1980s traveling in a flock to soccer tournaments. A flock of cardinals is called a radiance, and we were radiant. Every tournament we touched turned to gold. Mr. Ryan, a cyborg in cutoff jeans, recorded it all. he was one of the team dads. In 1987, we competed in the U.S. Girls Nationals tournament in Seattle. I was 16. My hair suffered from a combination of hairspray and sun-in. Seattle was as far from Ohio as I'd ever been. The top 4 teams in the country were there: California, Texas, New York, and us, Ohio. Everything was fancy. My teammates and I felt important because people other than Mr. Ryan filmed our games and interviewed us 2 at a time. Who will be the first to get pregnant? They asked us. Who will be the first to get married? Who will have the most kids? These are the questions they asked the best girls soccer team players in the nation. Not one of us said, "Are these the same questions you ask the boys' teams?" Maybe the questions weren't so far off. One of my teammates got pregnant the next year, and another the year after that. I was about to start dating the guy I would eventually marry and divorce. Most of us became teachers, nurses, stay-at-home moms. But it makes me wonder, can different questions conjure different futures? So what if they had asked us who will be the first to play on the U.S. women's national team? Or how many gold medals do you want to win? Or who will be the first woman president? But in 1987, there was no Women's World Cup, no women's soccer in the Olympics. We'd never heard of a U.S. women's national team, and we still haven't had a woman president. Okay, so then a little bit later, that's kind of those are the first few pages. A little bit later, I asked kind of the question of the book: if I could have looked into my teenage goalkeeper palms, what would I have seen in my future, and what would I have told myself? So I talk a little bit about how Albert Camus and Vladimir Nabokov were both goalkeepers, and I have quotes from both of them about that, and that they were 2 of the best-known writers who were also goalkeepers. But of course, the difference is, so like them, I was a goalkeeper who wanted to be a writer, but unlike them, I was a girl. So in the book, I then kind of contextualized my soccer experiences that I was able to have in the context of Title IX, which was the law signed in 1972, and I was born the year before that. So we kind of like grew up together. And I was very interested in the way that Title IX shaped my life and opened up all of these experiences for me to be able to play soccer and other sports in high school and then in college. So in the book, I also do a little look at the people who, like the history of Title IX, how it came to be, with representatives like Edith Green and Patsy Mink, and then Bernice Sandler on the bottom left, and Senator Bai, who from Indiana, who helped make it happen. But they didn't know that they were making this, like that the law would end up affecting sports the way that it did. But in fact, it changed everything. And there's all these quotes that I have of how basically we went from 300,000 girls playing high school varsity sports in 1971 to like well over 3 million today. So I got to talk a little bit about that. And then I also did other research where I thought I was the first generation of competitive women's soccer players. And I learned about teams like the Dick Kerr ladies from the 19-teens and 20s in England, and others actually in Europe. And so I added some of their history and how they were playing in front of thousands of people. Their first match was like in front of 50,000 people. In 1921, they played in front of almost 1 million people over the course of the year. And then they were banned from playing football going forward, football being soccer. People didn't like women playing. They thought it was, quote, unsuitable for women. They didn't like their women dressing in such clothing and doing these athletic things. They thought they would not be able to have babies anymore. And so they were banned from playing. So I was fascinated by that history and how it intertwined with my own experiences. So one of the things that I bring together in the book, or this idea, I always thought of like my sports life, like being an athlete and being a writer and artist, as quite separate. I sort of like was an athlete in my early years and then like a writer and artist. And in this book, I kind of like bring together the fact that I don't know why I thought it was so different being an athlete and being an artist, because an athlete who is a woman has more in common with an artist who is a woman than an athlete who is a man. And this spread brings together a number of the women that I talk about, women artists, football players, and today's soccer players with quotes that they had. There's no reason why football should not be played by women. Virginia Woolf, the masculine values prevail. Women are not the ornamental and useless creatures men have pictured. Leonora Carrington saying, I didn't have time to be anyone's muse. And Brianna Scurry, the U.S. women's national team goalkeeper, saying, we want equal pay. So I'm going to transition a little bit to give you some context for that journey of becoming from a writer to an artist. So a decade ago, I did something that totally this is no longer The Keeper, right? I did something that totally transformed my writing. I started drawing and painting and collaging. I loved these visual experiments, which were distinct from my writing practice until they weren't. So I was doing these things separately, and then I started to connect them. So I have this kind of mixed media, abstract pages in my journal, and I just got out my typewriter and started typing. This was when my daughter was about to go away for college. So I started typing and just gluing onto the page, she will leave soon, for good, for bad, for a while, for college, forever. Then kind of the same thing, but I was adding like just typed digital text over top. And this is an excerpt from a longer piece called The Fish. This is the fish the day we told our teenage daughter we were getting a divorce. We all sat at the dinner table and wept. This is the fish months later after the other fish had died. And then I go on to talk about this fish that like lived through like 4 years of all of this change in my life and like would not die. You can imagine how it ends, but I'll leave it there. I began to incorporate comics elements such as panels, speech bubbles, and thought bubbles, and I started working digitally with and without collage. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was telling stories in a way I'd never imagined. These were some of the books that hugely inspired me, and not just inspired me, I kind of used as like for like inspiration and sometimes just total imitation in The Keeper and my other works. So for example, this is the opening page of Alison Bechdel's Fun Home. And I just basically took the page layout and like stole from it for this sequence in The Keeper where I'm like practicing my goalie hands at home while I'm watching Days of Our Lives. Borrowing from Persepolis, both like the black and white palette in The Keeper, where I talk about these two different sides of this friendship that I had. We were like best friends, but then things started turning. So I juxtapose with the black and white, but also then with kind of the split screen, split identity, as I'm like toward the end of the book coming back to answer this question about reading my teenage goalkeeper poems. Myra Kalman was a huge influence. Her drawing of Nabokov is here in the middle of the screen, and then on the bottom left, I think that's Tolstoy. And then I also love using gouache for these like kind of lush paintings. So I've got like Virginia Woolf and her sister on the top left, and then a lady footballer on the right. And I just kind of mix all of this into The Keeper. I did a ton of research, and research when you're doing a graphic memoir is often like your own like teenage diaries and photo albums, but I also have a bunch of books that I was reading. And I would take notes, like riff some lines that I thought I would turn into pages and draw them later. Then I would do some sketches and storyboards just in like with a pen in a journal. And then I would convert them digitally with my iPad, which I'm happy to talk about more. And this is in closing, the two major things that I did to really like teach myself how to make graphic literature was I decided to edit a book on it, and I found like 28 contributors, people I really admire doing cool and a variety of things. And edited this book where each contributor has a craft essay, an exercise you can try at home, and then like four or so pages of full color examples of their work. And those are the contributors on the right with some sample work from them. And then finally, I decided in 2018, if I was going to get good at this, I was going to just start drawing every single day. So at the end of the year, I published an essay in the Rumpus where I asked what happens when you commit to creating something every day for a year. And this is just a little excerpt of it where I use some of the art I made and kind of answer that question. You exist in the world differently. You see objects and shapes and colors in ways you've never seen before. You make things you would have never imagined making. You read differently. You misread. That actually said Saunders, but I thought it said sadness, and I was like, yep. You think about writing differently. Sorry, I actually don't know what that says because my screen share is over that. But these are quotes from Milan Kundera. A character is not a simulation of a living being. It's an imaginary being, an experimental self. You think about art differently, art's cleaners, and poetry, and sports. And I was watching the 2018 World Cup and getting all into thinking about my goalkeeping years again. So we come full circle, and that kind of got me into my work on The Keeper. So that's it. I'm going to conclude and turn it over to Alice and Jesse Lee.
Oh my God. Should I just start now, guys? Is that like, okay, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Why do I don't have anything to say. That was amazing, Kelcey. So inspiring. And everybody should sign up for her Substack. It's The Habit of Art, right? Is the name of the Substack? Yeah. Amazing.
Thank you.
Okay. Now for someone who approached this in a very different way. So yeah, my book is Alice's Big Book of Mistakes. And unlike Kelcey, I just dove into it and purposely, I think, as I was creating it, didn't really look at any other graphic memoir work while I was doing it. And I always think about myself this way, is this kind of problematic? It's something that as a literary writer, I'm also guilty of, is like when I'm in the process of working on something big, I don't read or look at other people's work. So for about 2 years, I worked on this project and didn't really look at any other graphic memoir or any other stuff. And so what I'm going to do actually is share the very beginning of the book, which kind of tells you like why I decided to write this book about mistakes. So let me start out with, okay, here we go. So what I'm going to do is, okay, you guys can see this? Everything okay? Yeah. Okay. So this is from the very beginning of the book, before I actually get into the gist of the matter.
You know,
but
Alice, all I can see is something that says loading. I
Oh,
don't know
really?
what that does.
Can people see it? No?
I think it's still loading.
It
Oh,
says
still
Google
loading.
Docs loading.
Okay. Let me know when it's done, somebody. Oh, it says screen sharing is paused for some reason. I'm going to stop. Yeah, it's not happening. Let me try to share a different version of it, which might actually end up working better. Let's see. Okay, let me see if this works. Okay. Yes, no? Okay, all right, I'm gonna
Still
try one
no.
other. Wait. One more.
Still no. It says double click to enter full screen mode. She started screen sharing, but there's nothing there.
You can maybe send it to Chloe or Shasta and they can try to do the screen share.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to like show you it. And then actually everything else, hopefully the other things I'm going to share with you will work better. So basically, what I'll show you is, what I'm going to do is just read you the author's note. And then I'm going to sort of talk a little bit about the process and hopefully show a little movie of some of the illustrations laid out on my office floor. But so this is what I wrote at the beginning of the book, which is, many mistakes were made in the creation of this book. In fact, creating this book may in and of itself have been a big mistake, a waste of time, a wrong decision. Only time will tell. The size and format of the panels are inconsistent. The chronology is wonky. There are grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes galore. The writing is a cross between free associating and off the top of my head blather. The drawings are, well, what the drawings are. Some work and other are dopey as all get out. I invite you to grab a pen or pencil to mark up this book as you wish. Circle the stuff you think is really lame. Mark the aforementioned vocabulary-related snafus. Call out the terribly rendered anatomy, cars, animals. Use a red marker if you really want to go to town. Oh, and hold on to that writing implement if you make it to the end of this book. That's when you really want or need it. So I started this project without, like I said, without knowing anything, and ended up drawing on, got a sketch pad out and started drawing on paper that was this size, right? Which is not standard 8.5 by 11. It was like, I think there's like 10 by 13. So it was already the size of the paper was the wrong paper for like a standard printer if I wanted to, print images out and see what it looked like. So I had no ability to kind of actually see what this book would look like once I made, if it ever became a book. And I really wasn't sure it was going to become a book at that time. So what I ended up doing is deciding that I was fascinated with the concept of mistakes and why people make mistakes and what's the difference between a mistake and a failure and a regret, and just like using my own life as a way to explore that overriding concept. And so once I started going, I ended up having like an entire, here, let me go and go to this. Let's see if you guys can see this. Hold on one sec. Not going to do that. Just a minute. Let me see if this is going to happen. Okay. Can you guys see that? The
No, not really. We can see it sort of dimly, and then it says click to exit full screen.
Oh God, I don't know why this has worked before, guys, right? We did a test before and it worked, but this sort of, ends up being, you know what, I'm going to actually undo that do not disturb thing because I wonder if that's having some kind of effect on it. So we'll see. All right, let me try this again. Okay, here we go. Okay, can you see this?
No. We can sort of see it says Alice Kaltman. Maybe if you start it, we can see it. Is it a video?
Yeah.
So there's a sort of part of the
Video.
screen and it says Alice Kaltman.
Yeah, okay, that's it. Okay, so I'm going to show you this, guys. This is like about a year into the process of making this book, and I laid out what I had. It took about 2 years, but so this is a year in.
And so it begins, the fruits of my labors for the last year or so. There they are. My mistakes, Columbus's mistakes. But then everything else is here. Many, many drawings.
You'll see that some of the drawings are completely wrong sized and vertical or horizontal or clipped off or.
And it goes down the corner, you know. Some more mistakes over there. There we go. There we go, all the way around.
Okay, so that just gives you an idea of like kind of the mess I was dealing with. So once I decided to put it into book form, I had to kind of take those wrongly sized, illustrations that were like maybe, half the size they should be and put them all in like, like vertical. I should have like basically made them all vertical like this one. So you can see it's kind of like a collage. So it's like a cutout, which I then put like a edges on. So like the original illustration was this. This is from a section about smoking. And then I added like kind of a border. I didn't realize that with graphic work, you're supposed to have like borders around all your illustrations. But then I stupidly did this one and I kept it vertical. So once it was accepted for publication, the publisher took this whole giant big mess of illustrations and had to, do all sorts of work to make it all work into this size book. So this is like 8.5 by 11 standard size book. And again, did one mistake after another, but it all ended up kind of working out in the long run. And I think one thing I'd like to say about another parts of the process of making this book is that for those of you who are writers, the writing that I did was really like, I just didn't think about it. It was a little like taking a Kathy Fish flash fiction, like, workshop where you just sort of write and you see what you come up with. And some of that ends up being kind of sometimes I think the best writing I've done. So I would just write this stuff and not edit it, not go over it at all in any big way, because it's like, when you're doing graphic work, it's the marriage of the image with the words. And so the words to me sort of like were like supportive of the image, right? So it's a little bit of it's a switch for me. The other thing I wanted to share with you guys is, so that's my book. It's fun. It's easy to read. It only takes like an hour and a half to get through the whole thing, and you can draw all over it yourself. So one thing I did also when I was in the process of writing this book was I invited my friends to kind of come in and share their mistakes, friends and non-friends. Just I did like an open call for mistakes. And so I thought I'd share. So my book is totally done by hand, pencil, then marker, then penciled in, smudged all over the place. And then I basically realized that once it was done 2 years later, I was like, I need to learn how to draw on an iPad. So I got an iPad and I learned how to draw on the iPad. It's not as I don't know, I'm kind of into it, but I'm kind of not into it. Sometimes it feels like I'm cheating, but a lot of times it's great. And my ability to like kind of use color is been really fun for me. So anyway, so what I've done is I've collected a bunch of other people's mistakes and they write the kind of text and I just do the illustration. I'm not going to read the text on these, but I'm going to tell you like kind of what's going on. I'm going to share a few of them. So this one that you're seeing now is, oh yeah, you're seeing the fixative one, right? The artist. Okay, so this is an artist friend back in art school. She was so like obsessed with her work. She was like constantly just paying attention to like what was like on her canvas or in her pad. And she basically reached for her deodorant and put fixative under her armpits instead of deodorant. So there's that one. Okay, now here's another one. Okay. This is what I consider my like sort of like I don't know, it's sort of like, like symbolic one. This is a friend who was moving into his new house, moving his refrigerator in, and he ended up like jamming the refrigerator on the eve of the house, and it all got stuck. And so he like the house was gonna like fall down, and he like injured his back, and the whole thing was again a mistake shit show. Let's see, I've got just a couple more of these that are fun. Oh, okay, this is a fun one. Okay, so this is my friend who wanted to be in, it's in like the 80s, and he was kind of like thought he wanted to be in a fraternity. He was not fully himself yet at this stage in his life, and he had a wicked crush on the president of the fraternity. And so after like rush week or whatever, he thought that like the best way to get into the fraternity would be to leave a handwritten thank you note in the guy's underwear drawer. Suffice to say, he did not get into the fraternity. Okay, and lastly, okay, this is the most recent one I've done, which I just posted. Okay, so this is a friend who was in her backyard and so excited she found they hear chirp, 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 little birds in a nest. And she got up on a stepladder and wanted her two very young sons to come see it. She's like climbing down to get them to bring them up to look at the bird's nest, and she knocked the brand new baby birds to the ground. Okay, so this has been really fun for me to like kind of just do the drawing and have other people's writing to kind of like inspire me. And then but one other thing I'm going to say about this is, okay, those are my drawings. They are what they are. They're, they're fine. But at my book launch, I did this really fun project where like thing, like we had like a little musical interlude, and I invited people to draw their own mistakes. So I gave poster board out so they could lean on their knees. And the stuff that people came up with, we had like a little art display afterwards. And the people who think they can't draw make the most amazing stuff. So I'm just going to show you a few of these. This is a very standard mistake I think that everyone has made. This person cut online inadvertently, and there were like 20 people behind them. Right? Don't you love, look at the line. I love the line. Right? Okay, this one actually, I did do an illustration of this early on, but this was my friend who went to the beach and put her bathing suit on inside out, and so the cups and the crotch were exposed, and she just like had absolutely no idea, and she was just standing there, and people were like, all right, what's up with her? Okay, now this one I love, and I'm going to ask my friend if I can actually do an illustration of this, because this one just cracks me up so much. So it says this: the one time I kicked the hamster ball down the stairs. So any of you who have had hamster pets know about hamster balls. Like you put the hamster in there so you can get like exercise. And anyway, this friend of mine basically kicked the hamster ball down the stairs. So anyway, that's it for me.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. I may do mine pretty quick because otherwise I don't think we're going to have time for any questions. But so I'll start with a little bit from my book, and then I'll back up to tell you how I actually only just started drawing 4 years ago at 64 and had never drawn before in my life. There we go. So now I get to say, can you see that? All right. So this is just my book, French Girl, is a memoir in 17 shorter pieces, and this is the very first piece. I'll do a couple of pages of it. When I was growing up in Florida, we had 13 orange trees in our yard. I never wore shoes unless my mother made me. Then I broke my back. I had to wear a back brace. My doctor published photos of me in an orthopedics journal. I wasn't allowed outside. I can only imagine my friends without me. My mother was worried. Down the street was an old house with a mausoleum in the front yard. People said there was a glass coffin with a girl inside. My father was worried. He looked at my back brace and worried I was a girl made of glass. And I don't know if I can change. I may have to stop sharing and reshare. So, oh, there it is. Can you see my little monster? That one? No. All right, let me get out of sharing and get back. We all have our technical difficulties. So I never drew before in my entire life. Really, I think the last time I remember drawing something is when I turned my hand into a turkey in elementary school, and my teacher said it wasn't a very good turkey. I think I pretty consistently got poor manual dexterity index on my report cards, and which needs improvement in art. But I was in Montevideo, Uruguay. I'm a translator of Spanish language poetry, poet for a long time, fiction writer for a long time, words, words, words. I felt when I was a kid, there was a door marked words and a door marked art, and I went through the door marked words and I didn't look back. And, but I was locked in a 10th floor apartment, not even a balcony. And when there was a really a lockdown there, like I could only go out to get groceries once a week. And so at the grocery store, I saw that there was paper and some colored pencils for school kids. And I bought some because I was just going crazy. All I could do is just read bad news on my computer. And I started doing little drawings. And I'll show you one of my very first ones, which is Monster Me. Let me get it open. Here we go. Share. With colored pencils, with the colored pencils that I do. There's little Monster Me, which I have to say, fair resemblance. But that was pretty much one of my very first drawings. I also drew like the brick wall outside my window. When I got back to the States, I began taking some online classes. We were all pretty locked up in the States too, and I was teaching online. And one of the first ones I took, which was with Kristen Radke, Kelcey Ervick was in my class with me. And I went on to take some great classes. I have to say, I'm a big fan of the Royal Drawing School in London, where you can take classes online. And when they're at night, they're in the middle of the day here. And that was the only classes I took where people were mostly artists trying to draw instead of mostly artists trying to write, and instead of mostly writers trying to draw. And I had that problem. So in my first classes, I was trying to do a graphic version of what I now call my all-word memoir called Space. It's about growing up in Florida during the moon race. And it has my breaking my back in it. But I kept drawing very traditional comics in panels with watercolor or colored pencil. And I had this problem. I'm going to drop a link in the chat, which is a piece I wrote for Writer's Digest about how I think I was told actually in the class I was with Kelcey not to draw an apple and then write apple above it, that your picture, your drawing, and your words are supposed to be doing something different. So gradually, especially through the Royal Drawing School drawings, I just started drawing. I was doing a thing where I was trying to draw a drawing every day. I started in Uruguay. I would draw something, I would put it up on social media, and people, that was the baking bread era. People say, it's great. That monster's great. That apple looks almost like an apple. But I kept going with that. And then I started to try and not do the apple thing. I started doing the drawings first, and then the drawings would sort of coalesce around an idea, and I would then sort of write the script for it and began to develop a story, the stories that are in French Girl. Most of those were published in literary magazines. That's my world, I'm a poet. And so I just sent them in through the nonfiction category, usually window, to a literary magazine, and they got published. I too did the thing where I mistakenly, foolishly drew some of them, there's one, horizontally, which is a huge pain in the ass, basically, when you turn it into a book, because the book is that way. But I didn't know any better. And these are soft pastels. So imagine, they're not chalk, but imagine like the world's softest chalk. And I began drawing in those. And the problem with those is you can't actually, especially when there's one with all color, you can't actually letter on it. So the only part of my book, French Girl, that is digital is that I had to learn to do the text in Procreate, which is dropped in as a different layer. Otherwise, I've stuck with my idea that I learned to draw in order to spend less time on the computer, not more time on the computer. And so the only time I've actually done hand lettering was I got to take an actual in-person class with my wonderful colleague at the University of Wisconsin, Linda Berry, who is in one way the most generous, as you can imagine from reading her books, Syllabus and Making Comics, the most generous, non-critical person in the world. And also, in what she teaches in her class, a tiny bit of a fascist. And one of the things that she makes you do is all your hand lettering, everything by hand, old school. So it's good training for me. But I didn't end up doing panel comics. I don't know if I will in the next one. So mine is 250 pages, I think, and it's 250 drawings. And so I just would say that I think most of the people here are probably word people, and they're thinking, can I make that leap to the visual thing rather than artists who are trying to say, wow, could I possibly write a few words? And I could say, if I can, if I can do it, I started when I'm 64 and 68. I have a book that was just listed, wow, my most amazing moment in my entire life, as one of the 10 best graphic novels of 2024 by the Washington Post. Just knocked me. It's the only time I've ever used the expression gobsmacked. I was gobsmacked. And I only say that not to praise myself, although I'm certainly happy about it, but to say, really, honestly, I believe anyone can draw now. I've come over to the Linda Berry School. She believes that if you writing, there's no difference between writing and drawing. They're all, they're all images on the page, and that we've made this foolish division between the two. So, I encourage you all, if you're sitting there thinking that you'd like to do a visual poem or a graphic comic or anything else, to just do it. If you want to get brave, look up some of Linda Berry's exercises online or buy one of her books if they're amazing. And there are all these great classes. I'll also quickly, as other people go on to other things, type some of the names of people I took classes with, because they teach different places and you can kind of look and see if you can get a class with them. And they're all people I would very, very much recommend. So I will do that silently while people begin asking questions.
And Jesse, if you wouldn't mind emailing me them, and then I can send them out to everyone who's here and post them on the YouTube comments too, to share the information.
I will do that. I'll also type them in.
Okay, thank you. You guys, this was really great and fascinating. Thank you so much. I saw earlier there was a question from Peter, so let's start from that. And meanwhile, you are all welcome to put questions into the chat. Peter wrote, has the graphic memoir become enough of a thing to gain the attention of publishers, agents, booksellers, or are we all still inventing it? Is this kind of a word thing or primarily graphic? So a lot of you were talking a lot about the process, learning to merge the two worlds together, but not so much the publishing. So maybe each of you, if you wouldn't mind, could share a little bit about that process of starting to submit your graphic memoirs or essays. Maybe we can start with Kelcey.
Sure, I'll unmute. I do think they are coming into their own as a thing. When I pitched mine, I think that the graphic element was appealing to agents and then ultimately to editors. I think also the like Title IX and women's history that I incorporated was appealing as well. Like I don't think me just writing a memoir about like growing up as a non-professional soccer player, like, there's like professional athlete memoirs that you are interested in because they're professional athletes. I'm like the non-professional athlete, but I was more interested in just like, yeah, how these bigger forces shaped my life and kind of talking about them. And we were coming up on the 50th anniversary of Title IX when my book came out. It came out in 2022. So when we were pitching it, it was coming up and we ended up getting it out in 2022. So I do think the graphic element was a big part of the appeal. But some editors like don't really know what to do with it. I was fortunate my editor had edited a graphic memoir before. And I think now with like printing changes, we can do much more in terms like there's just like more freedom and Procreate, which both Alice and Jesse Lee talked about. And I had a similar like, I will not do digital. And then it's like, thank God there's digital when I'm trying to do a full-length graphic memoir. But I think that's made it really, easier. And so all sorts of technological changes have just like for printing in full color, even though it's still expensive, has helped as well. I'll pause there.
Yeah, and I put the link, I think it's correct, to Procreate in the chat. If it's wrong, please do the correct one. Alice, would you like to talk a little bit about the submitting and publishing?
Well, I don't have much to say about this because like I said, I wasn't even sure that this was going to be a book. And so for me, the whole journey was a little bit different in that the publisher that had published my two previous books lives in Brooklyn, and he actually overheard me talking about this with Robert James Russell, who some of you guys know quite well, who's also an amazing teacher. About 3/4 of the way through making this book, I did take a workshop with him, and Kelcey, you came in and did like a guest appearance. But so I already had like all this stuff done. I was like, oh my God, I've done this completely wrong. But anyway, I was talking to Rob about this at AWP, and my publisher happened to be standing there, and he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, damn it. So, that I started this project. And so I actually gave him this whole big clunky thing of my drawings, and he decided that he wanted to take a stab at doing Word West Press's first graphic piece of work. So I was a guinea pig for him as well. So he made lots of mistakes of his own on the printing end of things. So I don't really know about the submitting stuff, everybody. Peter knows this about me already, but everyone
Well,
else, yeah,
yeah,
not to share.
Yeah. As I said, I actually just started drawing them, and actually from the very beginning. I think the one that I did in class I was with Kelcey. I'm a person who does something and then I submit it. And so, like the very first one that I did in color pencil, I think it was in Waxwing. It's called Falling. And but the pieces that are actually in French Girl, yeah, I just started sending them into literary magazines. And at first, I hadn't figured out the Procreate thing, so I would just put the text in white space above the image. I would drop the image into a Word doc and put the text above or below it. And I actually, some literary magazines have comics windows, tabs in Submittable now, but sometimes I get the feeling there's no one on the other side. Like I send something there and it's just crickets for 2 years. And so I would just, rude about it. I would just send it in as long as they took a PDF and they're submittable, I would send it in as a non-creative nonfiction essay. I'd say, here's an illustrated essay, have fun. And so actually a couple of my illustrated essays won actual essay competitions, one at New Letters, one at a New Ohio Review. And so I thought, okay, they're graphic essays. And those are being published various places. And I doesn't really think of it as a book. I mean, it's 17 pieces that are all sort of memoir, but I still thought I needed to back up and do a graphic memoir version of the Word one, but I couldn't do it because it's too many words. Also, I wrote it already, and I didn't really feel the same way about my childhood. And so when I started drawing you're just different. You come in a more dreamy, image-like way. There are pieces in French Girl that are like based on fairy tales. And my editor at Field Mouse Press saw one of them and asked me if I had a book. And I said, I'm not sure. And I, put the stuff in a Google folder, and he looked at it and he said, of course you have a book. And so I got a contract for it. And then the idea, Field Mouse Press is run by 3 guys who are like comic critic nerds from way back, and they run a online literary journal for comics called Soul Rad. And so their big pitch is that they do beautiful books. So I got to work with the graphic designer when I got to find out that I wasn't supposed to have done vertical stuff and that I needed to scan it all in 400 DPI. And they actually had it printed in Hong Kong. It's a very beautiful book on very beautiful paper. But all of this is cheaper now. So the book's like $22. It's not, for a 250-page book. And I also found out publishing things in literary magazines. At first I thought, well, they can only be an online journal. Otherwise, they can't do the illustrations. But really, the price of printing in color has come down. So like I have a piece that's an image, places that are printed magazines, and they didn't have any trouble printing the color. So you're not limited. Only one magazine, I think, printed my piece in black and white because they said they couldn't do it in color, which is a bummer, actually. Color's my thing. But so I would say that if you're a poet and or a fiction writer or a nonfiction writer, and you're already in that literary magazine world, this stuff is just exploding in that world. And Field Mouse Press, if you want to look at that Washington Post 10 best graphic novels listicle, which came out, I think, last week, you'll see the publishers. 2 of them, I think, are Pantheon. They have a series, so that's a New York press. Everything else is a small press, either Drawn and Quarterly, which is Canada, Field Mouse, another called 10-Speed Bike Press, something like that. So there's a world of small presses for literary graphic work, books, in the same way that there's a world of small presses for poetry. So this is not the Marvel world. And there's a whole series of comics conventions that are all alternative comics. The big one is in DC and was just there in September, called SPX, Small Press Expo, where everyone has colored hair and it's very interesting clothes. So it's a different world, but it's a lot more like the poetry world than it's like the comics Marvel world. I'll put that in there.
Yeah. Oh,
I'll see if I can find a link for you for the Washington Post.
excellent. We have a question from Susan about the logistics of working with visual pieces. When submitting, did you take photos of the pieces with an iPhone or did you need a better camera? So at least two of you were talking about using the iPad, Procreate. Are there some other tools that you're using? And there was also a quick question asking if any of you are on a panel on a similar subject at AWP.
Kelcey was. I proposed one for AWP this year and they turned me down, even had great people on it. I'll say quickly, when I first published them in literary magazines, I was just taking a picture of them on my easel with my iPhone, and the graphic designer for Field Mouse Press had a bloody fit. And she said I had to find a scanner that would do a 400 DPI scan of each one of them. So, but I don't, the idea of like putting them on a stand and using a copy camera I think has gone the way of, slide projectors. People just use scanners.
Thank you. Alice?
Yeah, I've had a few things done recently, like sections of the book have been published in some online literary places. Bull used to be called Bull Men's Fiction. Now they're just going by Bull mostly. And also I did something with Sari Botten on her the Ulster magazine, and I just sort of made JPEGs, and then make them into a PDF, which, I finally figured out how to do. So that's, and then just send the PDF to the publisher or the literary magazine. So that's sort of like, so taking sort of a photograph, however you do it, whether it's, from your iPad or however, and then just putting it into a PDF and sending. So, I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you. Kelcey, other tools you use?
The person in South Bend
Basically,
who
just what they said. Because in the Keeper, it's mostly digital, but I did have some of my like original watercolors or gouache paintings in there, but there were few of them, and I just took a good photo, imported it into my Procreate. I mean, so Procreate is amazing. It's only like $12.99 now for the entire program, but you do need like the $1,000 iPad to use to use it. But I would bring that into a layer, like one of my drawings or paintings into a layer, and then I would do digital work around it. I too much prefer, just working with paint. And I was kind of the same way, Jesse Lee. Like I was like, I'm on the computer enough. I don't need more digital. But it's just so much more forgiving. You can create a layer, you can delete a layer, you can make a line, you can undo a line, in ways that you just can. And like, so just to make my deadlines, I needed to use the digital. But I'm very low tech. I don't really know how to use Photoshop. I mean, it's just not intuitive to me. Procreate is like an easy version of Photoshop to me. And then, yeah, JPEGs, PDFs just for submitting. I think my sample pages to my agent and editor were just JPEGs put together in a PDF that I maybe dumped into a PowerPoint, presentation. And yes, I'll be at AWP. I have done text image panels. I've pitched and been on them for like the last 5 years at AWP. I've been trying to make this happen. But this year I'm going to be actually just moderating a panel, but it's going to be awesome. It's called When Words Are Not Enough: Graphic Literature and Diasporic Histories. And it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be leading discussions with Victoria Chang, Tessa Hulls, Teresa Wong, and Erica Isomura. And they all have fabulous, like cool hybrid, like poetry and collage or graphic memoir. So I'm really excited about that.
Wow, awesome. Thank you. So many great resources.
I will drop in one other little
Go ahead.
wonderful cheat on Procreate or anything. You can create, there are free programs online where you can create a font from your handwriting. So one of the things that's really old school is having to hand letter everything. So for example, in an early comic for for Linda Berry, I had my puppy that I had as a child. I wanted to have it pooping and it was popping. And so then once you do that in ink, you just, you have to draw the whole thing over again. And whereas, if it's a font, you can just use it like a font. So big help.
Awesome. Thank you. I was going to ask about editing, but it sounds like these various tools make that a lot easier. We have just a couple more minutes. I don't see another question. I was wondering, since each of you also write in other forms, if you could each just say a couple of sentences about how the content of the words and the writing or the stories that you're choosing has changed in this graphic form compared to the just doors, just the words door that Jesse was talking about before. Should we start with Jesse?
I did drop the link in there for the Writer's Digest piece where I talked about how hard it was for me to make the image do something different than the words. You get very, very few words in a graphic piece, especially if it's in the panel. So like something like Kelcey's layout, you get more words. A sort of illustrated essay. I also do illustrated essays where, you can have like a half a page of words and then there's a drawing. But so it teaches you, you think poetry is a restricted form. If you're using panels or using very, text on the image in a graphic piece, really you just cut and cut and cut. You keep saying, is it in the image? Do I need it? And so it's really, it's like haiku level editing down a few words.
Thank you.
I
Kelcey?
can- Oh, sorry. Kelcey, you want to go first or? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I just wanted to say again, like just another approach, which was mine, was making the image and then sort of riffing off the image. Like I said, sort of free associating from the image I made. So there wasn't, like I said, you can also approach this in that kind of more sort of spontaneous. It's almost like I was using my own drawings as like ekphrastic prompts. I never pronounced that word right.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Yeah, I just want to echo what Jesse Lee was saying. Like, it's like compression, like poetry, I guess. Like, I mean, it's I do an illustrated Substack where I've got, maybe 10 or 12 panels for each one, and I write on it, and it's like I'll write 20 panels and then just like have to delete, or I'll write too much on a panel and I just have to cut, because you also have to think about the rhythm of the language, of the rhythm with the image. And Kristen Radke had a great, she edited a piece that I published in The Believer a few years ago. And I think like she's one of the editors who actually, someone's asking about editors, like who actually can speak to text and image confidently. A lot of editors are like, well, I can't possibly speak to image. My editor for The Keeper was great. She would kind of encourage me sometimes to like drop out some text. I was trying to cram too much in because I got so excited about the history and wanted to like tell everything. She's like, yeah, we don't need all that, and I'm like, okay. And anyway, so Kristen Radke with the Believer piece suggested that like between the final 2 pages that I had, that we needed, I don't know if she called it like a breathing page, but she had like a great word for it, but we needed like a different beat. And so I ended up having like my penultimate page just being like a big one image with like one line or, one sentence on it before the final page with like 5 or 6 panels. And so I don't know, thinking about that rhythm of sentences, but then the rhythm of text and image together, and then the rhythm from panel to panel is really important.
Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate you coming and sharing all of your thoughts. Let me